Dude, how the duck you doing? Duck Films here, and today we got some crazy patch notes for Deadlock as of the 30th, which is pretty insane. So there is quite a couple things we're going to be looking at. So the first thing is the base health per boon was reduced by 7. So your vitality investment bonus increased from 8, 10, 13, 17, and so on to 9, 12, 15, 20, 38, 42, 46, 50. You get the idea. So you get a now increase of the bonus health. But then same thing is with the gun damage, but it was actually rescaled, so it doesn't scale as hard, which is something to be interested in. And they reduced the bullet damage growth by 10% for the following heroes: Bebop, Pocket, Viper. They reduced the bullet damage growth by 5% for Victor, increased bullet damage growth by 10% for the following heroes: Mooncrow and Apollo, which is really interesting because Apollo, I feel like, you're going to be able to do some wacky gun builds. For Guardians, they now have 10% bullet resistance, which is nice. Walkers now have 25 bullet resistant. Your Medic Troopers actually got nerfed in lane, and the missing health percent was reduced from 14 to 12%, which is actually pretty massive. And the Medic Trooper fixed regen growth per minute reduced from 3 to 2. Now, getting knocked off of bounce pads now sends you downwards quickly rather than continuing the trajectory towards the bounce pad destination. This is essentially saying that if you're on a bounce pad, you're going up to the bridge buff, for instance, at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so on. If you get shot going for the buff, you will not be rewarded by landing on the bridge. You actually just get straight knocked down, so that you actually get punished if you mess up going for the buff. So you need to choose the correct timers to go for said buff. Then they did some other things with the souls required for boons. Basically, it ends at 40k instead of 49k. What is this telling me? Well, this is telling me that they want the games to end a little bit quicker. They want you to get to the max AP points faster than per usual, and just trying to get the game, gone and going, essentially. They also fixed some fire scaling for Yamato and Viscous not working correctly, which is nice. Then they added a ton of new items. They added a new tier 4 vitality out, Indomitable. It got upgrades from Reactive Barrier, causes the next stun, chain, immobilize, sleep, or silence for players to be automatically removed. When this happens, you gain a barrier and all your ability cooldowns are reduced. You can go ahead and look at that right now. As you can see, Indomitable, pretty cool. Now this is really interesting because this is essentially saying that it's just going to protect you from an instance of, said ability. It's going to cleanse, which I can already see is going to be extremely good on a character like Victor, for example. I think Victor with this item is going to be pretty scary. Following that, you have other items: active reload, fire rate increase, so all the items. Opening rounds now builds from high velocity, which is pretty cool. So if I go over to, for example, here, like so, got a high velocity, you can see it goes into opening rounds. Opening rounds goes into now, misspoke a little bit. High velocity, you have a couple options of where you want to build it into. Now have opening rounds, express shot, and armor piercing rounds. So it depends, depending on what you want to build into, is pretty nice. Typically, you want to be building into opening rounds regardless, because opening rounds is a very strong item in my eyes. Then they also did some other changes. They reduced it from 10 to +7, which is interesting. Then the weapon damage reduced from +45% to +30, so they actually nerfed opening rounds, but gave it a little bit of a cheaper way to buy. Split shot, the max stacks reduced from 65, weapon damage 10 to 8, cooldown increased from 24 to 27, so it nerfed the split shot. Shadow Wave is now a tier 3 item, but it did receive a ton of nerfs in theory. But it is a tier 3 item, so you're going to be able to use it a lot more frequently because it's on a lower purchase. For Akamic Fire, it was buffed. Heroic Aura was actually kind of buffed because they reduced the cooldown, and the bullet resistance aura was increased from 15 to 17. Blood Tribute now has an innate 8% debuff resistance, as well as Blood Tribute active debuff resistance reduced from 40 to 35%. For Spiritual Overflow, it no longer grants plus 15% spirit lifesteal at base. It now provides plus 15% ability duration. It also, active buff no longer provides plus 20% ability duration. It now provides plus 20% spirit lifesteal, which is kind of interesting. With Frenzy, it seems like they did some changes. It doesn't grant these anymore, but it now grants 160 health, fire rate increase, move speed increase, low HP now grants plus 30% debuff duration. Now, I'm pretty sure overall this is decent for Frenzy, which I need to test more, but just looking at it, it looks better for Frenzy in my eyes. So Restorative Locket, they nerfed Locket. Okay, they nerfed Locket by the healing per stack, but you can now stack up to 25 stacks. Basically, at the end of the day, if you have the max 25 stacks, I'm pretty sure it's in theory the same amount of healing because it's more stacks, or instances of that 16 health. So it should equate to around the same amount of total healing from a full stack Locket, which isn't anything crazy. They buffed Return Fire, the bullet resistance increased from 8 to 10, and the bullet damage return increased from 60 to 65%. Reactive Barrier no longer grants or restores when stabbed on trigger. It no longer grants plus 6 spirit. It now triggers off of Silence, same trigger as Indomitable. The cooldown was increased from 40 to 5, and barrier scaling was reduced from 2.1 to 1.8, so they nerfed Reactive Barrier. Trophy Collector was moved to a tier 2 item, which is pretty insane. Souls per stack reduced from 25 to 18, and out of combat regen reduced from 4 to 2, so a slight nerf to Trophy Collector, but now it's a tier 2 item, so you can start building your stacks up a lot earlier, which is pretty nice. Veilwalker now upgrades from from Sprint Boots, which is pretty cool. The bonus health reduced was plus 175 to 125. So it seems like a lot of these items they have in this game, they're trying to have different paths of where you can, build certain items in certain ways, which is actually really cool. Let's see. The spell, they reduce the spirit. I skipped that. Oopsies. Bullet resist for Veilwalker, spirit resist for Veilwalker. Counter spell cooldown increase from 23 seconds. Bonus health reduced from 75 to 50, which is actually a pretty big change. Rescue Beam cast range was increased from 32 meters to 35, which is pretty big. Colossus no longer grants plus 300 bonus health. Base health increase from... This is kind of interesting because I feel like when you pop Colossus, like you want to feel big. You want to have that extra HP. So this change is kind of interesting to me. I'm not sure if I like that. Inhib was nerfed by a little bit. Suppressor no longer grants 8 bullet resist. Okay. Spirit Snatch, Spirit Power Steel increased from 15 to 20. Arctic Blast damage height increased from 3.5 to 5 meters. Scourge no longer grants minus 4% cooldown reduction, now grants plus 50% of resistance. Spirit Burn DPS scaling increased from 0.05 to 0.06, so a buff to Spirit Burn, a super slight buff. They just moved the number up a little bit. Who knows if it'll be insane or not. Lifesteal adjustments. So active reload, bullet lifesteal, spirit lifesteal, shredder bullets, rend, trance, infuser, active, leech, vampiric burst. Okay, Mystic Reverb, imputed. All of these were nerfed. All of your lifesteal items were nerfed. Lady Geist nerfed. Abrams Siphon health reduced. So all of the lifesteal adjustments, everything with lifesteal in this game just got a massive nerf. Not necessarily massive, but a pretty significant nerf, I would say. Then we move on to the heroes. Abrams, they fixed the shoulder charge canceling issue. That's fine. Apollo, they nerfed his 1, so he's going to be doing less damage at the very beginning of the lane. Not a massive change, but definitely something that was needed. Billy, Rising Ram, tier 3 now also reduces cooldown by 10 seconds. Celeste, bullet cycle time reduced, so her bullet got nerfed. But her Shining Wonder, which I believe is her ultimate, got buffed. Doorman fixed the buff. Drifter got buffed. Dynamo. Connect Pulse got nerfed. Quantum Entanglement got nerfed because it got the buff or the cooldown increase. Haze being able to slide, so they're buffing alt Haze, I guess, is essentially what I'm looking at. Even though it's still the same, it's just an issue. Not an issue, but overall pretty good. Holiday. Nothing really crazy, just some changes to Lasso. And Furnace got nerfed, which is nice. Everybody wants to see that character nerfed, which is great. So like I was saying, Furnace got nerfed, which we all needed and all wanted. Flame Dash does half damage to objectives, and the Spirit Scaling was reduced from 1.0 to 0.7. Again, it's spinning turning towards Bounty from 80 plus 2 a minute to 40 plus 4 a minute. But Invulnerable, Medical Spectre duration increased from 6 seconds to 6.5, so your healing AoEs bigger, or sorry, last longer. Mina, most Nostra DPS reduced by 6%, so you're doing less damage with Mina ults. Mirage base health regen from 2 to 1.5, and the Fire Scarab's duration reduced from 8 seconds to 7. Lone Krill, Burrow's move speed increased from +4 to +5, which is pretty nice. Page, stamina increased from 2 to 3, which is really nice. Dash speed reduced to slow bucket, interesting. Hot armor cooldown reduced from 30 seconds to 2 seconds, interesting. Bookworm recharge timer reduced from 8 to 7 seconds. So some pretty nice quality of life. I would say this page of the increase from 2 to 3 stamina is really nice. Paradox kinetic carbine cooldown reduced from 30 to 28 seconds, so 2 seconds. They like these 2-second numbers, and I'm not really sure why. Time Wall tier 2 weapon damage increase from +30% to +35, which is interesting to see. Kinetic Carbine now provides +20% air dash distance when charged, which is pretty massive for movement people. Pocket, they buffed him. Enchanter's Sexual Spirit scaling increased from 0.9 to 1.1. Flexion cooldown reduced from 150 seconds to 140, which is pretty big as well. With Rem, they fixed a nap time bug. Pillow Toss recharge timer reduced from 10 to 9 seconds. Shiv, his alt fire knockback reduced by 10%, which is pretty big. Serrated Knife Spirit scaling reduced from 0.15 to 0.13. Like I've been saying, like, I don't know. That's curious. Adventure. Gut shot damage scaling reduced from 0.8 to 0.7. Gut shot wall hit damage scaling reduced from 0.9 to 0.8. For Victor, Aura of Suffering tier 2 increased from +28 max DPS to +34, so they buffed his AoE healing, or AoE damage, sorry. Shocking Reanimation tier 3 increased from -100 seconds cooldown to -130. Viscous Screwball lockout period from being affected again reduced from 1.35 to 1.2, whatever. Now Viper also got somewhat of a nerf. Lethal Venom cooldown increased from 24 seconds to 28. I mean, fixed armor piercing rounds doing damage through Petrify, which is nice, but like the issue with Viper is that she just pumps out damage with just her gun, not necessarily the other abilities with this character. And then they did some changes to the streak wall, so that's whatever. Overall, very interesting changes. I'm not too sure. Like, some of these changes are a little wacky. I'm not gonna cap. Some of these changes are really odd to me. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's like I said, it's an early access game. They're gonna be messing with a ton of numbers, but yeah, we shall see. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. As always, I will have the link to the patch notes pinned in the comments section. But yeah, take care, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.